everybody, great to see you. I know that some of you have already heard me introduce myself, but I'm going to just quickly reintroduce myself. My name is Adora Svitak, and today we're going to be learning about acing your state writing assessment and beyond, which is basically a longer way of saying do well on your state test, and even better. So we're going to be talking a little bit about prompts as well as personal narrative, which I'll get into later. But first, in case you're wondering why a 13-year-old is talking to you, this is my first book. It's called Flying Fingers, Master the Tools of Learning Through the Joy of Writing. And then this is the second book that I wrote. It's called Dancing Fingers, and it's a book of poetry. So I really love to write, as you can see. And today we're going to be talking about some really easy ways to do well on your state test. And we're going to be talking about personal narrative. Now, personal narrative might sound kind of hard, but when it comes down to it, it's really a story from your own life. So let's start with, what does your face look like when you think of writing home prompts or writing for a state test? Are you happy, a little bit nervous, really confident? How do you feel? Nervous? Okay. So for those of you that are a little bit nervous out there about writing or writing from prompts, keep in mind, prompts don't have to be hard. They can be pretty easy. You just start on your test by reading the prompt carefully, looking for key words, and thinking about the purpose of the prompt. What are you trying to do? So, you get a prompt, you start reading it, and then you ask yourself 3 questions. What is my purpose? Who is my audience? What is my perspective? So, when you get a prompt and it says, tell a story, imagine that you've been taken back in time. What do you see around you? How do you get back home? Describe your adventure. So you get this prompt and you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, so they want me to tell a story. That means it's some kind of narrative. And then, so you found your purpose. What kind of response should I write? Who is my audience? Who is your audience when you're writing on a state test? Anyone? I'm sorry?
The person reading your story.
Exactly, the person reading your story. So that would be the people who will be judging your response or giving it a score on the state test. Now, your audience, because you don't know very much about them, you have to maybe explain some things that you would know, but they might not know. So knowing your audience, even though you don't know that much about them, can be very helpful. What is my perspective? Does anyone want to tell me what perspective means?
Point of view. Point of view.
Point of view.
Point of view, yes. Very good. It's your point of view, where you stand on something. So for instance, if I got a prompt and it said, your school has recently decided to make all students wear uniforms. What is your point of view on this issue? How do you feel? Share your opinion and support it with convincing reasons and details. Then I might say something like, well, I'm a fan of uniforms because blank blank blank, or I'm not a fan of uniforms because of this. So by asking yourself these 3 questions, then you get to learn a lot. The first thing is, what is my purpose in writing this? Is your purpose to persuade, to inform or explain, or to entertain? So today we're going to be focusing on the narrative writing area, but I want to quickly explain what the rest of these are. Does anyone know what persuasive writing is?
Persuasive writing is trying to make someone do something.
Very good. It's trying to make someone do something. Raise your hand if you've ever seen an advertisement. I see a lot of raised hands. Okay, so have you ever seen an advertisement? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So that's probably most of you have seen an advertisement of some kind, whether it's on TV or maybe on the side of a bus or something like that. And that's a good example of people being persuasive. They're trying to get you to buy the newest cool pair of jeans or or some different kind of coffee. So persuasive writing, we see it being used not only in essays, but also in advertisements. When people are running for president or running for elected office, they're always trying to persuade you to vote for them or your parents to vote for them. So persuasive writing is used every day in some way. Now, what about expository writing? Does anyone know what expository writing is? Okay, well, here's a clue. If I were writing a persuasive article about a penguin, then what might it be like? It might be something like, penguins are the coolest animals on Earth because they are cute and they have lots of skills or talents. If I were writing an expository essay about a penguin, I might say something like, penguins' natural habitat is on the continent of Antarctica, where temperatures can reach frigid levels. So does anyone see the difference between persuasive writing and expository writing?
Yes.
Okay, what is the difference?
Go ahead. You got an idea, go ahead. It's okay to take a risk.
Hey, she said she got an idea.
Kia, you have something to say?
She raised her hand, Mr. Martin.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Tell us real fast.
Exactly, very good. Persuasive writing, you're trying to convince someone, you're trying to get someone to believe in your opinion. You're saying, penguins are really cool, they're the best animal, and this is why. When you're doing expository writing, you're like, well, penguins live on the continent of Antarctica, and they eat lots of fish, and they have the ability to swim, but they cannot fly because they don't have wings. So you're informing, you're just telling facts. So that's the difference between persuasive and expository. So what about the type of writing that we're focusing on today, narrative writing? Does anyone know what narrative writing is?
Take it back to class.
What's narrative writing? What's narrative writing? Let's get one person to tell us what narrative writing is.
Something about yourself.
It could be something about yourself, that would be personal narrative, but not all narratives are about you. A narrative is essentially a story. So if you've ever read a story, then you've read a narrative. Narrative writing is just where you tell a story. Okay, so we understand hopefully what persuasive, expository, and narrative writing is. You see how, this, when you see advertisements, this is an example of persuasive writing or persuasive thought at work. When your teacher tells you something, or when you watch an educational video, and that's informative or expository. And when your friends tell you a funny story, or you're reading a funny book, and that would be an example of narrative. So, I wanted to show you this little list. So narrative would be something like, once upon a time there lived a penguin named Walter. He loved to swim and play with other penguins. Expository would be, the penguin is a type of bird, though it doesn't have wings, it makes up for it with the ability to swim for long periods of time. And with persuasive, it would be, the penguin is the coolest animal on Earth. So persuasive, you're trying to convince somebody of something. Expository, you're trying to just share what you know. And narrative is where you're trying to tell a story or entertain. So, narrative, that's what we're going to work on. Does anyone know what a personal narrative is? So, if you know that a narrative is a story, then what is a personal narrative?
Personal narrative. Story about you.
Is a story about you, exactly. Very good. So, if a narrative is a story, then The Lord of the Rings is a narrative, and so is your favorite cartoon. But we can also, stories from our own life are narratives too. So, not all narratives are personal narratives, but all personal narratives are about somebody's life. They've probably written it about their life. So a story from your own life is called a personal narrative. Today we're going to be talking about choosing a good personal narrative and how to make it interesting and exciting. So what kinds of stories do you like?
Mystery. Basketball. Cartoon. Mystery. Basketball.
Okay, let's quiet down. Okay, so taking what I heard, because it was a little bit difficult with everyone speaking over each other, I heard, I think 4 things: mystery, fantasy, basketball, and maybe just 3 things. Yeah, okay. So, next time, try going one at a time. So it looks like you guys have a pretty diverse range of interests. You like a lot of different things. So we have mystery, fantasy, basketball, cartoons maybe. I heard someone say that. I've never heard of basketball as actually a type of story, so that's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of stories about basketball stuff. Now what do you think is one thing all of these different genres or all of these different types of books have in common?
Raise your hand, please. What do you think, Brandon?
They have words.
No, that's not a word.
Hey, girl.
Yes, they do have words. What else do you think they might have in common?
Friendly pictures?
Okay, so we know that they have words in common. We know that they probably have characters in common, but there's a lot of things that are different. They're probably about different things. They are in different places. But raise your hand if your book was interesting to read.
What?
Okay, so think of your favorite book or your favorite type of book and raise your hand if that book is interesting to read, if it's fun to read. Okay, I see some raised hands. Now, what do you think makes a book fun to read?
Jaden?
Stop.
Be more specific. What kind of stuff in the book makes it interesting? Okay, it provides information for your internet game.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay, let's take it. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's take an example of. So you're reading a book and you come to the end of the chapter and it says something really exciting, like, I thought that I would be safe after I ran off the boat, but little did I know that I was followed by someone. Okay, so that's sort of I know that's a really bad sentence there, but that sort of makes you want to hang on. You're like, oh, well, who's he being followed by? Why do you have to be safe after running off the boat? What's going to happen to you? You have all these questions after you read the end of a sentence and it's like, little did I know this would happen, or I thought I would be safe, or something like that. And then you want to continue reading because it's really exciting. You don't know what's going to happen next. Have you ever read a story where you know every single thing that's going to happen? You open the first page and you know that on the next page this will happen, and on the page after that this will happen, and you know every single thing that will happen in the book. Have you ever read a book where you know every single thing on every single page? Probably not, because then the story might be a little bit boring. If you knew everything that was going to happen to the character, then you probably wouldn't be in as much suspense. Stories are more exciting when they're suspenseful, when you're not sure how they're going to turn out. So, what does suspenseful mean?
Raise your hand if you know what suspenseful means. Any guesses?
Okay, so if a story is suspenseful, you want to keep reading because it's interesting. You're not sure how.
When you are not sure how they are going to turn out.
Yeah, exactly. Stories are more exciting when they're suspenseful, when you are not sure how they're going to turn out. It says it right on the board. Now, can you remember? Can any of you remember a time in your own life when you weren't sure how things were going to turn out? Could the teacher please call the students?
Birthday party.
Okay, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you've ever moved from one place to another. Also, could you stop dragging the chairs down? It makes a loud noise. Have any of you ever moved from one house or one apartment or you've lived somewhere and then you've moved? Have any of you ever moved before? Okay, I see some raised hands. Okay, so that would be a time when you're not entirely sure how everything's going to turn out. Maybe you're not sure if you'll like your new home. You're not sure how many new friends you'll make, or whether you'll like your new neighborhood as much. So whenever you move from one place to another, there's a lot of questions that you might have. There's a lot of things that you might not be sure about. You've probably also all taken big tests that you don't know how well you'll do on. You might have studied a lot, but you're not sure how well you'll do. So throughout our lives, we have times where we're just not sure how things are going to turn out. So tip number 1 for a personal narrative is to choose a memory about a difficulty, a conflict, or an obstacle, and I'll explain what that means. But why would you want to choose a memory about a difficulty to write about?
Hands up, why would you want to choose a story or a memory that's difficult? Or that has conflict? Adrian.
Maybe, you would try to be like something like a book that the one that you have just to try it out with people or
Denise?
I'm sorry?
Make it exciting or interesting.
Exactly.
Make it exciting or
To make it exciting or interesting. So you've all read lots of books, I'm sure, where there have been difficulties in the books. You open up the book and a few pages in, maybe the character is living a pretty happy life. They they like their life and everything's going really well, and then suddenly something happens. Maybe they have to go in search of some really important thing, or maybe their house gets destroyed or something and they have to build a new one. Or maybe there's a big bad wolf coming after them. Or maybe an evil stepmother. Whatever the difficulty is, it makes the story interesting. You don't want to read a book where it's just once upon a time, there was a place where absolutely nothing happened and everyone was so happy, the end. Would that be that interesting? No. So when we write our own stories, we want to take that idea from the fictional stories we read, that stories are more exciting when they're about a difficulty, a time where you're not sure what's going to happen. An obstacle is anything that gets in your way. So if I'm trying to run over here and suddenly I slam up against a wall or something, okay, I know it's not there, but that would be an obstacle. So kind of cheesy example, but we have lots of obstacles in our life. Some of them are invisible, and some of them are actually physical. So some examples might be your sister, a storm, your fear of the dark. So let's take, for example, your fear of the dark. How would that be an obstacle? Maybe if you want to get from your room to the kitchen, but it's really dark in the house and you're super scared and you think you see all these weird shadows, so that would be your obstacle. A mean dog. If you really need to get to school, but there is this mean dog that's always barking at you and being really frightening, then of course that's a big obstacle. And then not having the right brand of shoes. That's something really small, but it could be an obstacle to some people because they think, oh, I don't have the right brand of shoes, and it makes me look bad and stuff like that. So an obstacle is anything that gets in your way. Now remember, we want to choose a memory about a difficulty, a conflict, or an obstacle because it makes our story more exciting. No one likes to read a book where just life goes on normal during the entire book and nothing bad ever happens and nobody has to solve any problems. And that's not how life is either. If we had absolutely perfect lives and we were happy all the time, then that would be great, but unfortunately, bad things do happen. So we're going to practice with writing about obstacles and conflicts. So, what is an obstacle? Anyone want to tell me what is an obstacle?
Okay.
I think that's something that keeps you away from going to another thing.
Exactly, it's something that keeps you from doing another thing or keeps you from going where you want to go. If your goal or what you want to do is over here and there's just an obstacle blocking you from getting to it, then you have to overcome the obstacle. You have to jump over it or go around it or find some way of getting over it. So ask yourself, what kind of obstacle should I write about? Think about a time where you wanted to get somewhere and there was something blocking you. It could be something as simple as you wanted to go get another slice of pizza, but your big sister grabbed it and stopped you from having it, and she would be your obstacle. Or it could be something like you really want to jump into the water at a pool, but you're just really scared of the water, and so your fear of the water is your obstacle. Okay, so does anyone want to tell me about an obstacle they've had this week?
Has anyone had an obstacle this week? Something that stopped you from doing or going where you wanted to go?
Okay, your car broke. That's a good one, and that's a good obstacle also because a lot of people can relate to it. A lot of people have had their car break down at some point, and so they know what you're talking about. Okay, anyone else? What are other obstacles you've had this week?
Adrian?
I'll show you guys, right? What?
I'm sorry?
Not frustrated and to crash.
Okay, you felt frustrated and you needed to cry, so maybe your frustration would be kind of an obstacle because if you wanted to do something but you were just really frustrated, and that would sort of keep you from moving on. What are some other obstacles?
How was your mom an obstacle?
Okay, so you're saying I want to go to my friend's house and your mom is kind of blocking you from doing that. So our obstacles can be people, they can be animals, they can be objects, they can be your own mind. We find obstacles pretty much everywhere. So keep those obstacles in your head and think about writing about them for your personal narrative. And what about conflict? Well, conflict can be a disagreement, a struggle, a challenge, or a choice. So have any of you ever argued with little brothers or older brothers or sisters before? Okay, have any of you ever gotten into an argument with your siblings? I see some raised hands. Okay, your brother. So that's an example of a conflict. Any of you who have ever gotten into an argument, which you probably have somewhere, maybe not with your siblings, but with parents, even with friends, that would be a conflict. It could be a disagreement, a struggle, a challenge, or a choice. Conflicts can be external. Anyone know what external means? External conflict. What does that mean?
For example, you could write about
Well,
that's a crap.
conflicts, external conflicts are conflicts that happen outside. So they're not ones that happen in your head. External conflicts would be arguments, a game of basketball, winning or losing a race, surviving a power outage or a storm, doing something to impress someone. So they all involve something else or someone else. Internal conflicts. Now that we know what external conflicts are, they're conflicts that happen outside, they involve someone else. Does anyone know what an internal conflict would be? I'm sorry? Yeah, exactly. So now instead of arguing with a friend or arguing with your sibling, you're arguing with yourself. And weird as that may sound, it's not a whole lot of talking to yourself. Oh, Hey Dora, I think that you look pretty ugly in that shirt. No, I don't. I like this shirt. It's not quite like that. Although you've all had that going on in your head, maybe you think, I wonder if maybe not that bad. But internal conflicts are ones that go on in your head. Time you have to choose between right and wrong. I wonder if taking that tennis racket from my friend, I'm just borrowing it, but I don't know. Is that nice to me? Is that right? Anytime you've had to kind of choose between right and wrong, or doing something that you're not quite sure is right, deciding whether or not to try out for a team. Well, I'm not really athletic, and I think I'd be a really bad basketball player. I'm not tall at all, and I can't tell one hoop from another, so I don't know, maybe I shouldn't. But then again, I like the sport, so if any of you have had any of those moments where you're thinking one thing and then you're thinking another thing, that's an internal conflict. Even trying to choose which flavor of ice cream to eat. Or do you want mac and cheese for dinner, or do you want lasagna, or something like that. Anytime you have those moments with yourself where you're trying to choose, where you're arguing with yourself, that's an internal conflict. So, what is an external conflict? What is an external conflict?
Something that involves someone else.
Something that involves someone else. Very good. What is an internal conflict?
Guys, we just talked about it. If you know, raise your hand. What is an internal conflict? Go ahead.
Siding with yourself? Yeah, exactly. Whenever you're arguing with yourself, choosing between something, having those moments, maybe not talking to yourself, but sort of in your head, you think one thing and then another. Conflicts can be serious, like choosing where to live, or they can be goofy, like choosing what shoes to wear. You've faced many conflicts in your own life. Some of them are small and some of them might be pretty big. And you can write stories based on your own memories. Here's an activity. Choose a memory you would like to write about. Choose a memory about a conflict and write down your idea. So you all have paper in front of you, it looks like, or at least most of you do. Does everyone have paper and something to write with?
No, not Mr. Martin class.
Okay, I see some people have it. Is there any way that you could give the person next to you maybe a piece of paper to write with?
Yeah, but she's not passing out the paper.
Okay, great.
You said that's a
Okay, quiet down everybody. Let's start out with
Sean? No, you're not Sean. Do you want to hold these? Is that a hold?
So, think. Choose a memory about a conflict. Time you had an argument with yourself, an argument with someone else. Remember what an internal conflict is and an external conflict. So an internal conflict is a conflict that you have with yourself, and an external conflict is one that you have with someone else. It involves someone or something else. Okay, so everybody quiet down. I want you to think about a conflict that you've had in your own life. It could be something like arguing with your brother or sister. It could be a time you had to choose between two different kinds of ice cream. It can be serious, it can be kind of goofy. So choose a memory about a conflict, write down your idea.
And you be back though, okay?
Oh, I'm grabbing a piece of paper. Okay, there shouldn't be talking going on. Right now, you want to think about what is your conflict, and write down the idea. Okay, quiet down. Raise your hand. Okay, raise your hand if you finished writing down your conflict. So I wrote down my conflict, arguing with my sister about what video game to play. Okay, so raise your hand if you finished writing down what your conflict is. Okay, if you haven't finished writing down your conflict, you need to start or continue writing it down. And raise your hand once you've finished.
Once you have your conflict written down, raise your hand.
I know you finished.
Guys, you don't have to raise your hand just a little bit. Let us know that you have a conflict idea on your paper.
Okay, I'm hearing some conversations going on. I can actually hear some of you whispering if you're close to the microphone. So let's tune that down a little bit. Okay, I think whether you finished writing your conflict or not, we're going to share what we have. So mine is, I already said, it's arguing with my sister about what video game to play. What's yours? Does anyone want to share theirs?
Me and Mom's sister. Share yours.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Everyone be quiet except for whoever's sharing their conflict.
You need to be on one. Adrian,
Fighting with my brother, playing with my nephew.
Okay, so you're playing with your brother and I'm sorry? You're playing with...
Fighting with my brother about playing with my nephew.
Okay, fighting with your brother while playing with your nephew. Okay. What else?
You can't come on the table. Speak loud and clear, please.
What's the game? Mom said no. Come in.
Okay, when did you play a game that your mom said no? What else?
Yeah.
Fighting with my brother, because, to see who gets the Xbox.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Hope is trying to speak and our presenter is trying to hear her. And when you are whispering at your table, it makes it difficult to hear. When someone raises their hand to speak, you need to be respectful of that and be quiet.
Okay, so we all have we all have different conflicts. It seems like a lot of us are talking about games or fighting with family members. You can have other types of conflicts too. It could be a conflict about, you could have a conflict with a friend or even a conflict with your teacher. If there was a time that you did something and your teacher is saying, okay, you need to get detention or stay after school or something like that, and maybe you were arguing about that. So some of you might have even had conflicts with your teacher that you could write about in a personal narrative. You all have conflicts in your own life, and by writing about them, then you can share them and also make your personal narrative interesting. So, everyone remember what an obstacle is? Does anyone remember what an obstacle is? Raise your hand if you remember what an obstacle is.
Go ahead.
Something that keeps you from doing something.
Something that keeps you from getting something or going where you want to go. Yes. Does anyone remember what an external conflict is?
Mayor?
I'm sorry? Okay. Yep. It's a conflict with someone else or that involves something else. What about an internal conflict?
Conflict with yourself.
Conflict with yourself. Okay, great. And finally, why are obstacles and conflicts, why are they important to your personal narrative? Why am I asking you questions about that? Okay, does anyone remember why we want to write about conflicts and obstacles? Why do we want to write about difficulties?
Why do we want to write about difficulties or conflicts?
One of the students said to make it more interesting.
Because we want to make it more interesting. Think back to stories that you've read. Does everything go perfectly well? Is it once upon a time there lived a girl named Cinderella and her stepmother loved her very much and she was extremely happy, and her stepsisters were really excited when she got to marry the prince. Was that how Cinderella went?